Sarah, I did one of my most hated chores, but with the highest impact this morning.
Tell me.
I washed a few windows.
Whoa.
Now, I've got to tell you, this is always one of those things where I'm like, God fucking damn it. And then I wash a couple windows and I'm like, boy, that is a real high value housekeeping activity.
It is. And you know what? I bet you feel very accomplished afterward.
I don't window wash for hours. I washed 3 windows and felt okay about myself. And then I'll do more later. That's how I roll.
Well, you did great.
Thank you. Now I can read romance novels for the rest of the day.
I have not done anything so productive today. I took the dog out for a walk and then I read this good book until it was time for us to record. So I have to say this. I'm not going to name this other book that I'm going to talk about, but I got really excited and I downloaded this book that somebody recommended to me the other day because it was a trope that I really like and one that we've covered on the podcast before. Yes. And I got a third of the way through and I was really bummed. It just didn't work for me on multiple levels. And I felt like it didn't hit any of the promise of the trope that I want, all the kink of the trope that I want. I mean, now I'm really speaking in obscure terms.
Yes.
So I'm not going to get too deep into it, but there's something really disappointing about buying a book based exclusively on the trope that you love.
Right.
And then having the book just not deliver on any of the joyful, sticky bits of that trope.
One of the reasons I love interstitials, and I know our listeners do too, is not just because I'm like, okay, if you love this trope, here's a bunch of books like this, but also to really think about why a trope works or what a trope is doing. It's really fun. It's really fun.
Yeah.
So you can text me the name of that book.
I will. And I think that, but I think that's the thing. I think also being, doing Fated Mates has made me more thoughtful about what I want.
Yeah.
To your point.
I think the other thing, though, is reading is so hard right now.
I've gotten better at it. As you know, last year I had a really rough time.
Yeah.
And now it feels like coming out on the other side. I get my second shot today.
Yay.
So it feels like in the last couple of weeks, I've really been powering through a lot.
You kind of hit your stride.
Yeah. I did. And now I've been reading a lot of really dirty books too.
Fine. I like that a lot.
We should do a dirty interstitial again. People, you're all pervy out there. We see the numbers. I want to just say, Jen and I see all the numbers. We see who's watching. Not who, but we see how many
of you
people are downloading and listening to certain episodes. We know what you like. Maybe you don't want to talk to your friends about it, but we know.
Sarah did something very meta this week. I re-listened to A Hunger Like No Other, and then I re-listened to our very first podcast.
Oh, God, was it terrible?
It was great. It was fine. We recorded it right before the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And I was like,
God.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
We've been around for a long time, and Brett Kavanaugh's garbage.
Yeah. So anyway,
and, I will say this: I've been seeing a lot of people reading and listening to A Hunger Like No Other right now. Cressley's in the ether right now. It feels like a lot of people are reading IAD, which is great. And if you are thinking about restarting IAD, hit the Fated Mates Instagram up on Instagram at Fated Mates Pod. And I've been putting in stories. I've been reposting in stories a lot of people who are doing IAD read-alongs.
Yeah.
But also if you just DM us, I run the Instagram account, and if you DM us there, I'll connect you to some people who seem to be doing it. But today, actually, I put on the stories. You should go look, Jen. I put on the stories this morning that somebody was like, I was warned about this book, but I'm on page 3, and he just ripped his leg off.
Sure. Part of my reason for doing it is I'm doing a puzzle that is the moon. And I thought I should read a book. I should listen to a book related to this this topic.
I almost bought you a puzzle that was the moon for Christmas. And then I was like, is this going to be too hard?
I'm doing one right now. I think it's going to be hard, but you know what? That's okay. I have not done one in a while, and I was really stressed out last week. And then I was like, I haven't done a puzzle in a while. I think maybe this will help manage my anxiety.
I was just about to, we have a very big, Jen knows this, we have a giant dining room table that I bought.
It's big.
Many years ago because I really like having dinner parties. And now I haven't had one of those. And I mean,
what are those?
Who comes over for dinner? Who eats food made by another person?
I don't know.
And so we just have a very big dining room table now. And I have a gigantic, like a 2,000-piece puzzle of Venice. The interesting was one of the last gifts my father ever gave my mother, and she never did it. And she was like, you take it. So I thought maybe I'd break out that Venice puzzle.
There you go.
And do it for 2 years.
One day we'll go outside again.
And then when it's done, I'll have a dinner party.
There you go.
Maybe you'll be here. Maybe it'll be time.
That'll be nice.
Little romance will be in Connecticut.
That's right.
It'll be great.
I'll be like, I'm coming to visit you. And then I'll see him for take him out to dinner with his friends and then immediately leave for New York.
Perfect.
Love you too, Mom.
Perfect. That's all you want in college anyway.
That's all
you want. The free meal.
Yeah, a free
meal.
You want to
hug your mom.
Some cash, right?
And then you want, and leave the money on the table and see your way out.
I'm not mad about it.
Anyway, we're reading a really good book this week. And you texted me this morning at 6 a.m. and you were like, I'm so mad. And I was like, oh my God, do you hate it?
Oh, I was like, no, I love it.
She didn't hate it. She loved it.
Welcome to Fated Mates, everyone. We should introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm Jennifer.
We're a
Prokop.
podcast.
I'm Jennifer Prokop. I'm a romance reader and critic. And you know what? The more I hate a character in a romance, the more I love the book. That's how I work.
I think that's real. That's real. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write romance novels. And yeah, I agree. I like my heroes to be just monstrous.
Yes, fine.
Just terrible people.
We're going to put in this thread that Kate shared with us that's about Shadow and Bone, I guess, and it's a really funny thread, though. It's great.
There's a great tweet about how you choose your heroes with, not your moral compass. And honestly, that's how I feel.
It's fantasy, and it's fine.
You've been with us for 3 years by now, and
we're not surprising
so
anybody.
You know that you know where we come from.
Talk to us about Ravishing the Heiress. You recommended this book. I read it for the first time last night. Tell us about...
I'm so glad.
Oh, God damn. All right, so tell us about it.
So Sherry Thomas started writing historicals right around the same time I started writing romance novels. And she came up, so in romance jargon, a lot of us, especially those of us who are traditionally published, meaning we're published by publishing houses and not independently published, we talk about ourselves as members of a certain class, meaning
sure.
Just like in high school or college, right? So Sherry Thomas came out the year before I did. So she was in the class with Courtney Milan and Tessa Dare, and the three of them were the rock stars, the rock star debuts of, I guess it was 2009.
2008 or 9, yeah, right.
Yeah. And everybody thought oh, these are the three. They're amazing. And then I came in after, along with some other people. But, when you're only 1 year apart by the time eventually, later, right. You can date and stuff. It's fine. It's not
Perfect.
It's not like they were seniors and I was freshmen. It's right. It was fine. So at the time, but Sherry has always been just a tremendously beautiful writer, who really showed, I think when you look at historicals particularly, I think this is true also in contemporaries, but we live on, I've talked about the branches of the romance tree, and we all kind of live on different branches of the tree. And, I think you can say Tessa Dare writes Regency rom-coms, and I write kind of more in the vein of the Lisa Kleypas, kind of something's going to blow up by the end of the book kind of book. And Sherry writes these like beautiful, lyric. I mean, her books are
gorgeous.
They're so literary. And
at a sentence level, they're so
they're so beautiful. A fun fact about Sherry that I think a lot of people don't know, but that she has talked about at length, is that she is an immigrant. She's a Chinese immigrant. She moved here when she was a child to Texas, I think. And she learned to speak and write English by reading romance novels.
What a world.
And I think that is really cool. So that's just like it's a fun little fact that I think is great. Anyway, so she writes these gorgeous Regency and also Victorian books. And I love a lot of her books. Last week we talked about widows on the podcast, and I talked about Beguiling the Beauty, which is actually the first book in this particular series. But for me, this is the book of Sherry's that I would hand to literally anyone and say, not only should you read this because it's, probably one of the best of Sherry's books, but also it's probably one of the best of romance. And it has a lot in it that I think isn't really ordinary for romance.
Right.
I think it is a marriage of convenience story that is about marriage and not about love. And I really love that now in a way that I probably would not have loved that at the age of 20. But I think there's something quiet and important about this book and what it says about the way we live in the world with other people. And I think romance is about relationships always, not just relationships between, a husband and a wife or a partner, but also about relationships between, siblings, between in families, and also kind of even with people who you'd prefer not to ever have to have a relationship with. Like, say, the woman that your husband has been in love with since basically birth.
Listen, we are going to finish this podcast and then I am going to take to my bed. So I read this book yesterday. I started it and immediately I read maybe the first chapter and I was like, okay, I'm going to put this down now because I can tell already that if I do not put it down now and do the things I need to do, I will be here until I am done. So I didn't, and then I did things all day, and then I got into bed with it, or laid down with it maybe 7 or 8 at night, and then I read straight through, and at one point texted Sarah and was like, I am going to fucking murder this man. And Sarah was like, does that mean you don't like it? And I was like, no, it means I love it. What are you talking about, right? Hello.
Let's talk briefly about the plot.
So Millie is a young heiress, and when I say young, I mean 16, of a family of,
a sardine fortune.
They make canned food, tinned food.
So it's Victorian England. It begins in 1888 and it ends in 1896. Not 1996. That's different.
No. And she is about to be married off for her money to an older, he's in his young 30s, I think. He's not super old. Earl, who desperately needs her money, and that's just the way things go. That's right.
And he's a real blob.
Yeah, right. He doesn't seem terrible, but he's certainly not great. And she, though her entire life has known this is going to be her.
This is her lot.
This is her lot. And she loves her parents. So she's like, okay, this is the way it's going to work. And this guy drops dead. And then a young 19-year-old inherits the earldom, and her father essentially makes the same deal to this guy. And he is wrecked at the idea that he essentially has to sell himself to save this earldom that he never wanted, this crumbling house. And she recognizes immediately that like, essentially, she falls in love with him immediately, but knows he wants no part of a life with her. And so she immediately essentially strikes a bargain with him that says, let's not consummate the marriage. I don't want to have kids. You're in love with someone else.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to say, she doesn't strike a bargain with him like, this is going to be great for both of us. She is immediately in love with this guy.
Yes.
Like, instantly. It's love at first sight, right? The first line of the book is like,
yes,
she didn't believe in love at first sight, but it was, or whatever.
But it was. But she's doing it to protect herself.
Yes. And he's like, and he's so upfront about it. He's like, look, I love someone else and I'm always going to love this other person. And that's just that.
Right. Like, aren't you angry that you're being forced into this?
And it's not
I'm being forced into this.
Terrible. Like, in the moment, you're sort of like, oh God, this is terrible. But then you're sort of like, he's not being mean. Like, he's sort of saying like, look, this is our lot.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And so then Millie comes up with this idea to protect herself and give him freedom.
Right. And so she says, how about we give ourselves 6 years? We'll just stay married, but not consummate the marriage. And he immediately counters with 8. Let's make it 8. And it makes her feel even worse.
Yeah. He never wants to touch me.
He never wants to touch me. And so then chapter 2 picks up 8 years later, and they are best friends, although we don't know how, because it literally is like boom to the chapter.
Time slip. So
yes.
We've talked before about how much I love time slip is like one of my favorite things in romances.
So
and
great. Yeah.
Very, very few people do it as well as Sherry does. This is not her only book written in time slip, and she is great at it.
So we know that they're really close and they're friends, and Millie gives Fitz permission to leave her to go be with his true love, Isabella, who is
It's
back.
This great, but okay. I get that we're doing the plot, but we have to pause and talk about this scene because it's this moment. So chapter 2 or something, like it's very soon, very early in the book.
And like,
Millie is sitting there at breakfast.
They're at breakfast.
And she is sitting and she says aloud, your mistress, Isabella, we'll call her Isabella. That's her name. Like, she has a last name, but who cares?
Sure.
Isabella is back.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, yeah. And they're just at breakfast, like sitting across from each other. And she says, I suppose you're going to want to see her. And he says, yes, she's already written to me. Like, it's all incredibly just like normal.
Yes.
And then she's like, okay, well, have a great day. And she gets up and she leaves the room. And the maid starts to clear the plates.
Yes.
And he says, hang on a second, like, she left food, like, give that to me, I'll eat it, right? Like, she can't waste, he won't waste her food. But she usually, like, she never leaves food because you serve yourself. And Millie is so put together and like aware. She's so in control of herself, her emotions, her body. She never even takes more food than she can eat. Like, she does not misstep. So we're in his POV and he's like, it's so weird. And then he takes the last bite of her eggs and they are salted to the extreme.
Because she's,
And that's the first moment where you realize, oh, Sherry Thomas is writing on a level that none of us can access. Like,
listen.
I mean, it would just never occur to me to write this scene. And like, it is so perfect. And those salted eggs, you can taste them.
Yes.
Because she's so tortured.
Yes.
By this experience.
Oh, fuck. Listen, everybody, you are not ready. And here's the thing. I am not a big angst reader in general, right? This book knocked me on my ass. Like, I'm not even kidding you. And you know what? It's really funny. I feel like I've read Sherry Thomas in the past and people are like, oh my God, these books are so amazing. And I was like, my brain is like, meh. And now I'm like, oh, now I know why. Because Sherry Thomas ruthlessly rips into your fucking chest, takes your heart out, like stomps all over it, and then is like, here.
But here's the thing. She does it in such an insidious way.
Oh God, yes.
That like, you're not, the whole time you're like, oh, this is fine. Like, I'm
fine.
I'm reading this book and it's fine. And then you're like, oh no, like every piece of it is destroying me. Like, but you don't even know that you're being destroyed until she's just left you wrecked. She's good.
Here's what I would like to say.
There's the show title. She's good.
She's good. Yeah. Jen's in her bed. Here's the thing. Here's the thing though, and you see this throughout the book, and it is textbook, which is, we have talked before about how important it is in romance when main characters like watch each other, like this, right? The signals people give with their body language, with how they're salting their eggs, whatever, right? No one does it like Sherry Thomas. Mm-mm. It is a masterclass in like the subtle clues that people give off for how they are feeling, or not so subtle, right? And they're all in action. It's unreal how good it is. I know, I'm sorry, I'm just like raving, but I cannot even.
No, I'm just taking notes for later, things I want to say later.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right, so here's the thing. The deal then is that the 8 years are sort of up, and Fitz really understands that he has made a promise to Millie about what's going to happen in 8 years, and that she would be a good mother. She's not even 25, right? He's 27. She would be a good mother. And so the right thing to do is to essentially say, before he goes to get with Isabel, and meanwhile, what we haven't talked about yet, but we will, is he has been having affairs the entire marriage, and she has had none, right? So she's still a virgin, and she has given him permission. She's basically like, look, we don't want to be married to each other, but we have to be. You just live your life. I am not going to get in your way at all. And so his deal is, I'm going to be with Isabel, but not for 6 months. I am going to spend 6 months doing my duty to see if we can make a baby. And then I will go, and then I'll leave you, and I'll go set up house with her and her children, and I will be with her.
It never occurs to him that there isn't a that he'll ever leave Millie, though. Like, he's like, we're going to be married. This is so English, right? It's like this perfect, like, English setup where he's like, we're going to be married. I'm going to get you with heir.
Right.
And then they keep referring to it as Millie's son. Like, Millie is going to get a son.
Yes.
And then he's going to go off and, like, live his life. But, like, of course, she will continue to be countess. Yeah. She'll continue to, like, they will continue to, like, have this house that they, that they have lived in and, like, worked on together. And I want to talk about that too.
Of course.
But for Fitz, this feels fine. Like, this feels like this is how it will be, and this will be fine. And Millie is so controlled and so buttoned up that she's like, yes, okay, this is fine. This is exactly what I thought would happen.
Right.
I mean, it is. And the whole time you're thinking to yourself, like,
what?
This woman is, but here's the crazy thing. You would think she was a doormat the way we're describing her.
Yes.
And
she's like made of steel.
She's just pure steel.
I think it was like, so the bargain that gets made, right? And we've talked all the way from the very beginning about like loving a sex deal. This is something else though, because this is a deal where he thinks she is doing it for him, and she knows she is doing it for herself, right? Like, it's going to break my fucking heart to try and love this man. I know that he cannot even accept that. The only path I have to be with him is to be like his wife in name only, his friend, his business partner.
It's so smart the way she weaves in that business.
Yes, right? And they will support each other, but like love will not enter into it, because otherwise Millie will just like break into a million pieces.
At the very, so then the time slip starts to become important, right? So now we've gotten you to about, I don't know, halfway through the book, right?
Right.
And the way that it's structured is every kind of 2 or 3 chapters, there is a chapter or a couple of scenes from the past.
Right.
And they're structured in a really interesting way where Sherry Thomas actually labels these scenes as like critical moments from the past. So it's like the deal that I can't remember the names of all of them, but like, it's like, you know, whatever the thing that is happening in the moment. Right. And we see she chooses very thoughtfully, and obviously because it's time slip, clearly she chooses the thoughtful scenes, the important scenes in their marriage. But there are a couple of things that are, I think, really important.
Can we talk about the honeymoon first?
Oh, God. I guess. I hate that fucking honeymoon. I mean, I love it. But like, let's do it. Sorry, I've jumped the gun.
Yeah, no, well,
it's important. No, it's important.
It is devastating. Basically, she packs clothes and he packs whiskey.
He's so unhappy.
Yeah. And the night of the wedding, he like basically sends her to her room and he has his room and he gets drunk. And the next morning he's like, I'm going to check out and I'm going to go a couple miles down the road to this cabin. And she's like, I have to come with you. And he's like,
because he starts breaking shit. Like he destroys the hotel room.
Literally destroys the room. Right.
And she's like,
you can't leave me here. The gossip will kill me. You have to take me with you. And it is 3 weeks of him drinking all day and like literally breaking shit.
Destroying this house.
Destroying the house. And she finds him. And there's this moment where she's like, she's 16 years old and she has lived in this happy home. And now she is with this young man who is out of control in a way that is terrifying to her. And terrifying in a way because the thing that really finally gets her is she finds him with a rifle, like pointed at his face. And she thinks he's going to shoot himself. Right. And so she throws all the whiskey away. And there's like crates of whiskey. And she just empties it all out. And she dries him out. And she is just like, and then the 3 or 4 days later, she's like, they're delivering more groceries today and they're delivering more whiskey. But if you have to turn it down, I'm not going to do it for you. I did it for you once. And it's at this moment that you realize what Millie is really capable of.
Yeah, she's so strong. And he realizes it too. And that's what's amazing. Again, it goes back to Sherry's just pure skill in the hands of a different writer. Probably me, right? I would say like, okay, he doesn't notice. Like he doesn't see. This is a point where the reader can see, but he can't see. He sees. He's like, oh no, she's literally saving me.
Yes. And then they get this missive from like a disaster.
Oh, but wait, we didn't talk about the fact that then she says, you think you're the only one who was in love.
Oh God.
And the reality is like, the heartbreaking moment of that is, of course, she's talking about him and she's losing her chance at love too. She sees it.
Yes.
Like any hope she might have had that she could convince this boy, because he is a boy, to love her is just out the window when she sees how absolutely devastated he is by her.
Yes.
And I might add, he's also said on numerous occasions, like, I'm only ever going to love her. Yes. Isabel.
Yeah. It is, I don't know. And I have such complicated feelings about it. I think as a woman, like the way this hit me, like Millie's sacrifice, like, you know, like this is my lot and I just have to fucking live with it. And the way that plays out differently for her than for him in this chapter, oh, God damn. I don't even know. I'm not even like making words. It was painful and powerful.
It's layered in so well. This idea of like women, the way women have to be in order to survive.
Yeah.
And I think survival is it's constant in this book, this kind of question of survival, what it means to survive, what it means to survive physically, emotionally, what it means for a business to survive, what it means for a home to survive, like what it means for the past, for the present. Like there's so many different ways that Sherry is playing with this concept of like survival and then layering on top of it thriving.
Yeah.
Right? Because none of these things at the point of their marriage, they are all just clinging to hope that they will survive it.
Yes.
And then she starts to layer in this like really beautiful way, this idea that they might not have to just survive. Right?
Yeah.
The businesses can thrive. The home can, the like estate can thrive. They can thrive as friends and then more. When they get married, each of these characters brings something to the table, right? Millie brings her fortune and the sardine company, the tin. Her dad's made a fortune in tin goods, right? It's the 1880s. Like this is the heyday of packaged, like it's the beginning of packaged foods as we know it. And it is also the beginning of advertising. Like we've never seen advertising anything like this in the world until, Victorian, sort of the heyday of Victorian England. So she brings this company to the table and Fitz brings this house, this estate house that is in shambles and has quite literally like a wing of this house was added on to it not long earlier because the old Earl was keeping up with the Joneses.
Right.
And it is a monstrosity and it's falling down.
It's moldy and rat infested and
So this is what they have. And we are soon to discover that even the tinned goods company was failing. Right.
It's going to fail. It's not as forward thinking. It's not keeping up with the rest of the, these companies.
Right.
And
because the father basically was like sardines and something else.
Sure.
And
he's just like, this is working. Let's not change.
Yeah. Like I make sardines and therefore we're always going to make sardines and never discuss the possibility of making anything else. Anyway, point is they get to they come to this place where the second they get to the house, this familial estate that isn't really a familial estate. It belongs to the title, right?
Right.
It becomes clear that they have to break it. They have to destroy part of it.
Right.
I mean, there's so much here about packing in growth.
Yeah.
And I think we talk all the time about how romances have to start with characters at the beginning who grow over the course of the book. But every set piece in this book, every person in this book, everything in this book grows.
Yes.
And it is amazing how much she packs in.
It's like growth through destruction.
In a not very long book. This is not a long book.
No, I read it. Yeah. It's also knowing what you have to rip out from the root to make something new. Basically, she says to him, we got to just tear this wing down. And he was like, oh shit, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And at the same time, her mom has told her, just build a garden for yourself. And then there's Alice, the dormouse.
That fucking mouse. I can't deal with that mouse. So Isabel has given Fitz, in the past, a dormouse, which I don't know anything about mice, honestly, except that I hire an exterminator to deal with them.
Sure. Well, animals are always symbols. And the only thing I will tell you, I Googled it, is they are known for hibernation. And he talks about hibernating and their whole marriage is in hibernation. So I was kind of all right, fine.
But this dormouse lives in his pocket, which...
Whatever.
I mean, this is probably the only part of the book where I'm like, is this a real thing? Is this... What's happening here?
Yeah.
So anyway, Alice, the dormouse, lives in his pocket when she's not hibernating. And she eats caterpillars and nuts.
Sure.
And he feeds her, and he's in love with this little mouse because Isabel gave it to her.
Isabel gave it to him, yeah.
Gave it to him. And he shows it to Millie. Oh, it's so heartbreaking.
God.
in the past, right? So she's like, hey, what's the deal with this mouse that you have in your pocket?
Right.
And
Little pet.
is that a mouse in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me? and so he's like, what's the deal with this mouse? And he says, Isabel gave it to me. And he holds it out, right? Like he holds it up so that she can look at it. But he doesn't offer to let her hold the mouse. And she doesn't ask.
No,
but
she knows.
Like, it's very clear, right? This mouse is his. It's his via Isabel. For those of you who are Crown watchers, there were these echoes of this, like, kind of like this Camilla-y, like Isabel's this kind of Camilla-y figure who like seems to understand. Like there's this perception that Isabel understands Fitz in a way that Millie can't, right? At the beginning. And she kind of owns this misunderstanding also because she feels like, well, I have to own this, because if I start to feel like I do understand him very well, then I'll love him and then I'm fucked, right? So anyway, this mouse is very infuriating because at some point the mouse dies, and the grief that he has. So the mouse dies in present day. No, that mouse dies in the past, but later.
Yeah.
And so there's a moment where, you know, he's there.
Let it go.
He has to let this mouse go. And he like weeps over the death of this mouse. And then I'm upset about the death of this mouse. And I resent that.
Yeah. And then we find out later that like Millie has it taxidermied and
Millie
like
has it preserved.
And I'm just like, God fucking, he does. I mean, here's the thing. The reason I sent Sarah this text in the middle of the night about how much I hated this fucking guy is because I didn't, right? The thing that is amazing is Millie makes it so easy for him to be her friend, but to not think about
never
what he's doing
face
to her.
it. Never face it. All right. But can we talk about partnership? Because I said at the beginning that I think this book is really, it's a marriage of convenience story that probably, I'm not sure I've ever read a romance novel that tackles marriage quite so like well.
This. Right.
Because it feels very authentic, right? So they, like I said, they both bring these kind of broken or soon to be broken institutions like to the table. And there is a sense. And so at some point, you know, Millie gets I was going to say a text. Millie gets a text. Millie gets a text from Fitz. Millie gets an email. Geez. A letter. Yeah. Thank you. She gets a letter from Fitz. It's basically like, look, there is a problem with the company and I need you to come to a meeting.
Yes.
At the business, like at the warehouse. And she's like, my job is to like look good and have good posture. What on earth am I being invited to this meeting for? But basically he's like, look, I've gone through everything related to the company. And I think that we have things to do to like increase the holdings of the company, increase the profits. I want to talk about advertising. And like, here we are, like this hero who like, this dude who is just like, look, this is our company now,
her
right?
Her father has died and left the company to her.
Yeah.
And she goes off to be with her mom in Italy. And that's when Fitz is like writing letters. And then he's like, you got to get back here. Because if we don't fix this, the company will not provide the money we are going to need.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. They need this company to thrive. Yeah. It never occurs to him to just do it. And truthfully, he could have just done it, right? This is still like...
This is when we start to
He's
realize,
in charge.
Yes, but this is when we start to realize like the real partnership that they've created, starting with like destroying the house together, right? And now at this moment, you're like, wait, he could just do this without her.
But he won't.
Just a figurehead, but he will not.
And it's an interesting choice. It's a choice on a number of levels for Sherry Thomas, not the least of which it holds a lot of value in a lot of ways, not the least of which is it actually is the first moment where I, as a reader, realized that like he's actually a really decent person who cares a lot about her.
Yeah.
And respects her opinion, respects her like thoughts on all sorts of different things. And like he would never dream of fussing with her birthright.
Yes.
Without her permission and her input. And I think it feels it's this turning point in the book where you feel like, oh, they're going to be partners.
Yeah. And they're still kids at this point. He's just 21, right? So they like come up with this plan together and you're kind of like, what's the plan? And the whole thing you realize is it doesn't matter, right? The plan is that they are going to figure out a way to gain control of the company without alienating the people who actually know how to run it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It also speaks to, I mean, this is kind of a wonky historical piece, but it speaks to the power that women are starting to have in businesses, like even just like quiet, small power, often around things like advertising, because women are the purchasers in families typically at this time. And then on top of it, it speaks to the fact that nobility, that the aristocracy is having to get into business at this point. Like there isn't as much money in the Hill when like colonialism is drying up, right?
Well, and this becomes, okay, so
like these people have to get jobs.
Yeah.
Poor babies.
Right. And that's the part where, you know, they don't care what society thinks. Like there's this part where they have this really fascinating conversation where she's like, Millie says, look, if I'm good enough to spend this money, I'm going to be good enough to figure out how to make it. And you're like, goddamn right you are, Millie.
That's right. At one point they're at the dance with his.
Yes.
They're at a ball and there's a discussion of like, everybody will think they're very bourgeois. And it's like, yeah. They will.
Fine. Guess what?
But guess what? Those people.
This nice ball I'm having. Right?
Yeah. And your house is going to be the one that stands in 100 years. So there's like, so again, she's so good at it. She's packing in these kind of external things that are happening in the world.
In the family, right?
Yeah. And then, but can we talk about lavender?
God.
Are you ready to do that? Because I want to do that. So they build, so they've knocked down half part of this,
like a whole wing
house, right? The 2/3 of the house.
Yeah.
They just decide like, let's get rid of it. And then he gives her.
Well, he knows she's planting a garden
for her garden.
Well, he on her 17th birthday, he like basically. He's like, how old are you again? I don't remember why. And
he can never remember her birthday.
Well, he doesn't know it at all the first time. And then it's clear, like sort of in some later years, his sisters help her out. And she was really afraid that the sisters would hate her, right? And they are lovely and they think of her as a sister. And then the lavender, he brings her like a cutting of lavender. And he's like, I know you're going to start this garden and you kind of smell like this a lot. I think you like this scent. So why don't we like go ahead and grow some lavender? And I brought this for you. And it is the first real gift that he gives her. Mm-hmm. And unlike this dormouse that's going to die, right? This plant is going to live and thrive. And it's just this like little signal to us as the reader about like what's going to happen later. And what's going to happen. And this lavender sprig becomes lavender fields. So
I mean, acres and acres of lavender, which sounds lovely. And I want to go there.
Well, and
so I want to talk about flowers for just a second, because Sherry's incredibly smart. And I know she doesn't do shit like this for just because.
Right. It's all on purpose.
So Victorians were very, very into flowers as meaning. Like there's, you know, now we sort of talk about, every once in a while you'll meet someone and they'll say, oh, like rosemary's for remembrance, right? Which is, I think, from Hamlet. But the Victorians really, I mean, they packed it in. Every flower had a meaning.
Right.
If you, like I have family members, my dad always used to say like he hated chrysanthemums because they were the flower of death, and which must have been an Italian thing. But, you know, if you have like a grandma or a mom or a dad who like who's like, oh no, those flowers mean whatever. Often that meaning is Victorian,
Victorians.
right? Because the Victorians were super extra. I mean, nobody's more extra than the Victorians. So, but lavender is really interesting because the meaning of lavender in now, if you talk about lavender now, it's sort of like undying love, like eternal, like devotion and loyalty. But Victorians always had, because nothing could be straightforward and they're super extra, they're almost every flower has a double meaning, right? So it could, so if somebody gave you like a bouquet of lavender, it could mean like and undying loyalty, right? And devotion, or it could mean distrust. Right. So the two, often the meanings were foiled. So it was the idea that like, what does this really mean? I mean, it's all nonsense. But the point is that lavender means both distrust and loyalty. And it's a question of which one it actually will turn out to be. And I think there's something really powerful in the fact that this field is full of this like flower that means so much, that is so related to how they are running back and forth with each other, especially because at this point, Isabel's gone, right? She's been remarried.
Right. Sure.
Like there is a sort of sense that like their life is progressing and Millie knows that like there is a future for them by virtue of there not being a future for him with Isabel.
Right.
Except of course, Isabel's husband dies.
Yes.
And she comes back in this very kind of like, I want to be with you way. Like she has a whole plan. She's like, I'm a widow. Yeah. I want to buy a house. I found a house for us.
Okay. Point of clarification. He sets up a house for her. He gets her this house.
Oh, he sets her a house. Yeah. But then she's like, I want to buy an estate.
Yeah.
For us to live on.
He's going to buy it for her, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I did not mean to suggest that Isabella is shelling out any level of money for any of this. No, she is not.
Right. Well, and the thing
also, you get the sense that Isabel doesn't actually have very much money, right? Like that was the reason why they couldn't get married in the first place.
Right. Well, not enough to bail him out of this business where he's, inherited 80,000 pounds of debt. But the thing that's fascinating about Isabella, because we have to talk about her and infidelity.
Well, I want to talk about Lavender too.
And Lavender.
And Isabella.
Right.
Isabella.
Is it Isabella?
I don't know. What's her name? I don't care. I hate this. I don't care. Woman.
I do too. She gets her own book and
you really shouldn't hate her. Like, there's also that piece too that we need to get to, which is like, Sherry's so careful about like presenting her as like she also was a victim of fate.
Yeah,
but I don't care.
Yeah, it's here. We're going to talk about her though. I don't either, because I think the thing that was hard for me, that I really had my moments of with Isabel. Oh, hold on, I'm about to look with Isabel. Isabel is as soon as Isabel comes back, Millie goes back to being an interloper who, disrupted this great love. And instead, you're like, no.
Hang on a second.
Wait. And in fact,
he's so much better for her. In the sense that, like, I don't mean he is a better match for her. I mean, he is a better man because of Millie. He's grown up, right? Like, we talk about this. At the beginning of the book, he is a child who has childish thoughts and childish dreams and doesn't understand the way the world works.
Right.
And Millie is his, like, steadfast partner in this.
Friend.
Like, he becomes a man through Millie's love and caring. And, it's so infuriating.
And he's, doesn't even really know it because everything, he thinks, that's the part that kills me about this book, right? He's like, God, my lot totally sucks. And I'm like, this woman is just made your life completely easy, and you are still just like, meh. Here's the thing. Can we talk about infidelity and then talk about Isabel? So in the part of the deal is,
well, we got to talk about infidelity because third rail.
Right. Millie says, you live your life. I'm not going to get in your way. Do whatever you have to do. And he has 8 years worth of affairs. And I will tell you what, though, it is when he gives Isabel a jar of honey from their lavender fields that I was like, now you've gone too far.
A bridge too far. No, that
Listen.
lavender honey really hit me too. And it hit me in a different way. But yes, because Isabel also thinks he's gone too far.
Yeah.
Right? She's like, how could you possibly give me something she made? And he's like, she didn't make it. We made it together. And she's like, that's even worse. And I'm like, that's even worse.
You're about to take this man from his wife and not even think twice about. I mean, it was fascinating. It's fascinating how you like fixate on this like one little thing because you're like, okay, I can maybe get my head around why this is a betrayal, but why is like the whole betrayal is too big for me to even like grapple with, right? Even though she says have affairs.
But it's like that business. So, okay. All right, we have to talk about this, right? We're it's pretty far into the episode, but if you get a group of romance readers in a room and you say, what is the one thing that is unforgivable?
Infidelity.
Guaranteed 90% of them will say infidelity, right? It is incredibly difficult to write a book about infidelity. Hi, I've done it. Mm-hmm. And it is really, really hard to convince readers to turn the corner on a hero who has flatly cheated on the heroine. Right. I think there are a few ways to do it where, I think there are a few ways to do it right and to do it without readers like absolutely losing their minds.
Revolting, yeah.
However, many, 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 many readers, I imagine, have a lot of problems with this book because he is unfaithful to Millie emotionally for a huge portion of this book. Until he realizes that like he needs her, right? Like that he is only who he is by virtue of having lived with Millie's love and friendship and partnership. I actually really love infidelity in romances. And I know that that's probably like a horrifying thing to say, but I actually think I think cheating happens in the world.
Right.
And I think that marriages struggle with it and survive it. I would imagine that there is some number of our listeners today have had this in a relationship before and it has survived. Some number of those people have had it survive. Yeah. And like, I think marriage is one of those things where you can't, you say it all the time when you meet people in the world, right? Nobody can understand anybody else's marriage, right? And that's what's happening in this book. This constant sense of like, no one understands his marriage.
But here's what I'll say is.
Because his sisters don't understand it either.
Sure. Here's what I'll say about infidelity is in romance.
Yeah.
And I'll say the thing to you, which is, if I said it, you'd say it to me, which is, this is where the romance bumps into the fantasy.
Into the fantasy, yep.
And the fantasy is, once I fall in love with this person, that's it.
Yep.
Game over, right?
I do think that yes, that's a good point, because my infidelity book is The Day of the Duchess. Mm-hmm. But the hero has never not been absolutely head over heels, obsessively in love with the heroine. He makes a physical mistake, right? That is ultimately he is punished for and like has to grovel for 300 pages. But Fitz doesn't make a physical mistake. He's making an emotional mistake. He is harming her emotionally every day. Right.
Because she said, the physical, her saying, go ahead and have affairs, that, and she knows she's first. And there's a great scene where we are shown that it is not the fit, like the litany of women he's been with. There's two parts, and it is honestly fascinating. One is they're at a ball and his mistress is there. And he dances, not the waltz, something else with his mistress. And his mistress kind of walks by and shoots Millie a look like, I've got your man. And Millie turns to Fitz and is like, did you see what that bitch just did? And he's like, let's show her.
He turns to her and says, did you see?
Yeah.
And she says, yeah. She says, she knows that she has something I don't.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, that's the end of my relationship with her.
Yep.
I think it's really
they waltz 4 times in a row.
It's such a smart at first you're sort of like, why are we seeing Fitz with his mistress here? Like, this is an interesting choice. But it's Sherry saying to you, like, this doesn't matter.
This doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter to Millie.
Millie is not moved by it. Nothing about this matters to her. Right. What matters to her is the woman living rent-free in his head.
That's right. That's right. And
soon his house.
Okay, so then Isabel comes back and she starts to like make some moves into Millie's territory. And even Fitz is like,
you got to talk about the train.
This is not well done of her. And the part where, okay, so this is what prompted the part, it broke my fucking heart. So he gives her the jar of honey. I think this is before. And you're like, what are you doing? And then they're going to set up a house. And you're like, what are you doing?
But it starts to, it's important to point out that like things are unraveling.
Even Fitz is like,
really, like, there's like a crack in the paint. It's not, God, it's so delicate. Everything about this book is so precise.
Yes. So he is meeting, his family is all going to be meeting at the train station to go somewhere or do something. I don't know why. And Isabel shows up. And she's like, oh, I just knew that Fitz was going to be here. He mentioned it. And Fitz is like, wait, my wife is going to be here. And he's thinking to himself, like, he knows Isabel. This part I laughed at. He's like, you know that it wasn't malicious. And I was like, oh, Fitz. I felt like it was. And so they're standing there and his sisters are looking at him like, what the hell are you doing? You have this woman here. And we all know that she is different than this litany of mistresses you've had. And he is looking across and he sees Millie arrive. And Millie gets down out of her carriage and looks across and sees Isabel with them and gets right back in her carriage and drives away.
Oh, it's so good. This is what women have to do in the world.
That's when I texted you.
Because you want to just...
Yes, you want
her to fight.
Yes.
And then you're like, there's no fighting this.
There's no fighting this.
If you truly believe that the man you love loves someone else, like you have to walk away.
Yeah.
But it is so heartbreaking.
It is honestly.
And he sees her, right?
It's
one of those moments where throughout the whole book, like you said, there are these moments where characters see each other.
Mm-hmm.
There's a moment very early in the book when they first meet where she thinks he's not looking at her. And it turns out he's been watching her in a mirror the whole time. Like,
I highlighted that.
And Fitz is, and then it's like, I noticed that you love the bench that's in the townhouse in London, so I had one made for you for the garden here in the country. I noticed that you love flowers, so I bought you this lavender. I noticed like there are these remarkable little moments where Fitz is constantly noticing Millie, noticing like where what she is,
needs,
what she needs, how she thinks, what she loves. And in that moment, it's the first time he notices her
pain
instead of Isabel.
And he goes to her and he's like, yeah, where are you? You're coming for tea. And he doesn't say to her, I saw you come and leave. He just goes to get her. And I will tell you, it is this moment where, I mean, there's so many moments like this. And another moment is like, she says to him, and back to the like infidelity, like, I've watched you work a room. I know how you pick up a woman, right? You go in and you're all handsome and you just hang out with the men. And the last person you talk to is the one you really want. And it's like, I have got to tell you, I thought, can you imagine like being in love with a man and knowing the way he walks into a room and who he's going to choose that's not you?
Oh, it's heartbreaking. This whole book, it's just an aching, unrequited devastation. So if you love unrequited love stories and you haven't read this, like,
you gotta
get ready, strap in, because there's no unrequited story that's like this.
Like, so he basically says at the beginning, the chapter 1 is, okay, we're going to have sex for 6 months and then I'm going to go be with Isabel. And she's like, starting tonight? He's like, no, I'll give you a week, starting in a week. Because in a week, they're holding a ball for his sister who's newly married. And Sarah, I don't think I have ever felt this way in my life. People are like, I don't like a slow burn. Though, as it's getting closer to the night where they're going to have sex, I really was like, Millie, don't do this. He's just going to break your heart. Like, don't have sex with him. Run away. I have never in my life felt this way. I was like, just don't do it. This is going to be too much for your, too much. You are, no one is that strong.
The sex is so beautiful and it's so romantic and they clearly adore each other. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
And there, like, it starts off like she won't let him look at her, and like, right, it has
the lights
dark
and the
light.
yeah.
And then she finally lets him look. Like 3 nights later, right? She's finally lets him leave the lights on, and there is this sentence, and it was, then he made love to her, not only as if he had never experienced lovemaking before, but no one had.
I know.
And I was like, I'm gonna go lay in my bed. Because it is devastating.
Mm-hmm.
It's devastating. And it's devastating to him too, right?
One of my very favorite myths is the myth of Cupid and Psyche. And I always wonder about it when we get to a romance novel where there's like a darkness, like you can't touch me in the light. So briefly, the myth is, Cupid is Cupid and he falls in love with a mortal who is basically he's wildly in love with her, and in that way that Greek gods can do. And he says to her, like, they have sex at night, and they're together at night, and she's like, who are you? Who are you? And he's like, you can never see my face. Like, I'll come to you every night, but like, you can't see my face. You can't turn the light on. You can't, like, it has to be in darkness for, I don't know, mythology reasons. I can't remember. And and she has sisters who are like, of course, right? Sisters who say, like, you gotta, like, he could be anybody. Like, he could be a monster. Like, you have to know who he is. Like, who is this man? And she finally turns the light on, or he's asleep, and she lights a candle, and she sees that he's like the most beautiful thing she's ever seen, right? Because he's Cupid.
Right.
And then she basically it destroys them both because, it's about like mistrust and, all sorts of things. And I think I think this is a sort of nod to that in some way. This kind of like, once he is able to turn the light on and see her in that moment, like, it does ruin both of them, right? Because it unhinges her. She knows, like, once he sees her, she won't be able to hide how she feels from him. And she has hidden from him for 8 years.
Right.
And now it's like the worst part. Like, she has to hide all the joy and all the sorrow all at once in this time when, like, he's unraveling her.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, when he sees her, he is also wrecked by this moment of, I think this is the woman I love, but the train has already left the station. That's the other thing about this book. You really believe the train has left the station.
Yeah.
Even though these are the married people.
Well, and that's the part that is fascinating. I mean, I was like, how on earth are they going to fix this? Because, and basically Millie, so they have like this, like, unbelievable sex for a week, and then, like, they stop. Like, he, like, clearly cannot handle it, and so she's like, he's not coming back, and she says to him, okay, so you have to leave me. Like, you're going to have to marry her.
Yeah.
We cannot do this.
She gets her period on Paige.
And says, there's no baby, and I don't want to do this anymore. You can't, it's so clear. She's like, I cannot do this. And I will say, I'm still kind of pissy at him. He's kind of like, oh God, I guess I'll really break Isabel's heart, but I don't want to lose Millie. And you're like, fuck Isabel. I'm sorry. And I know she is not, like, she has her own problems, but I really wanted him.
If there is a misstep here, it is in that moment.
Yeah.
It is in the moment where she tells him that she loves him, right? That it has always been, because he's like, your dude has gotten married, surely. Like, this is, what do you think could possibly happen here? And she's like, you don't understand. There is no dude. It is you. Yeah. It has always been you. And you are destroying me.
Yeah.
And there is a moment there where you just want him to be like, oh my God, it's been you too. But again, there's like, as much as you say, this is where you say, like, this is where it butts up against fantasy, but this whole book doesn't feel like fantasy.
Right. Oh,
this book is
too real. Yeah.
Very real and honest and beautiful. And I think that's why it works so well. That's why that's why so many people, when you talk to readers and writers of the genre about this book, we all acknowledge.
Yeah.
Certainly writers all acknowledge that what Sherry is doing in this book is a very different thing than what most of us are doing. It is so honest.
Of course, it all has to end where it begins, which is at their home, right? And, Isabel's like, we're going to be a couple stops on the train from your estate, and, that'll be great for you. And he's like, look, I don't love you. I'm not buying this house. We can't do this. And they go to his home, right, that he's made with his wife. And she sees them embracing because he's like hugging her goodbye. And it's, Millie just like walks and walks and walks for hours. And she like sneaks back into the house. And, he like basically like storms the room when he sees the light on and is like, where have you been? Like, dragging the lake.
We're dredging the lake. Calm down, dude.
But I will tell you, I do think that maybe what I needed there, and that's really interesting because it's all her point of view, right? And I really was like, maybe I needed his point of view.
You needed one scene where we saw him just unraveled.
Yeah, and really
just wrecked.
Realizing, like, God, what if I lost her? I've been so cavalier about leaving her, but what if I lost her?
Yeah, but
I don't know.
I think you're right, but I also think like that's just not Sherry Thomas.
That's of course not.
And right? Like she would never give you that. It's too much. It's too extra.
It's too extra, but I'm extra. And Sherry, if you want to write that fucking scene and send it to me an email, right? But I mean, that's the part where it's like, this book has never been about that, but right. So this book is perfect for what it is.
No, it's so precise. The precision. This is like you're watching Sherry write a romance novel with like a surgical knife. I'm out here with hedge clippers, like kaboom, 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 like he's dredging the lake himself, right? In the dark. But like,
God.
And like, but it's too, like, I'm all over the place. She is laser focused on what she wants you to see. She chooses every word.
Of course.
She's so good. She's so good.
Oh, Sarah.
She's so good. If you are thinking about writing Marriage of Convenience, if you are a writer out there, read this. You're not going to be able to do this.
No, God, no. I mean, come on.
You should read this because you should know, like,
how it works.
This is what Marriage of Convenience were. If you strip a Marriage of Convenience novel down to the barest bones, it should be this story.
I will say one other thing about this book. Millie, I think, feels really alone in her misery in her marriage, right? But at the same time, it's clear to us how many people love her. And I think it's so well done.
I think so too.
Her mother in particular.
I also think it's so real. Like, I think, again, we keep saying that over and over again, but like, it's that nobody knows about other people's marriages.
Right.
You don't talk about, there's this like kind of, it's disloyal.
Right. Yeah.
Like she feels disloyal talking about him.
There's moments where you realize everyone knows what she's going through, right? Where it's kind of like...
But he feels disloyal too, right? Like the lavender is for loyalty, obviously.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because over the course of the 8 years, there are so many moments where he could throw her to the wolves.
Yeah.
Right? And live the life that she's promised he can live. And instead he protects her or he, supports her or he is her partner or like... Right. And it just feels like, of course they're in love. It's friends to lovers in the most intense way. And it's so good. It's so good. It's a great, great book. I'm really glad you liked it.
It killed me. I don't know. I mean, it really. Can I ask you? Okay, can I ask a question though? I have two questions for you.
Yeah.
Question number one is, after at some point later, she says to him, "I found you with like a gun pointed at your head. That's why."
Oh yeah, and he says, "Oh, it's a toy."
Did you think it was a toy?
Yes.
Okay.
I did have a moment where I was like, really? What a weird. But he answers really fast. Like I did have the hiccup. I stuttered there. And I netted out at, oh, this is like, he answered so quickly. There wasn't, I don't know.
Okay.
I also feel like that's a big,
yeah, right,
emotional, like, thing to put on the page and like never deal with I think I almost feel like she clarified that it was a toy to make sure that you understood, reader, that we were not dealing with a person who was suicidal.
Who's truly, yeah. Okay.
I don't know. You clearly didn't. I'm looking at your face, but
I don't know. I just spent a lot of time thinking about it. I was just like, in this decrepit, weird old cabin, why would there be a toy gun? And it doesn't really matter. I think ultimately he really was like destroying his life and she intervened, and whatever like sort of prompted her to do that doesn't really matter. I just thought it was like a really interesting question. Okay, here's question number 2. When Isabel comes back, has he slept with her?
Ever?
Yeah. No, after she comes back. In like off page.
Meaning does he sleep with her off page? I thought about that too. I didn't care.
Okay.
This goes back to Derek and what's her name?
Yeah, right, sure. And that's why I thought of it, right?
Because I don't care. It's like he did. So who cares, right? Like, this goes back to like, it doesn't matter about the Mrs. Dorchester at the ball who he's been sleeping with, because like, it doesn't matter.
The emotional cheating is so much more important than the physical cheating.
This bastard has loved this woman for 8 years longer.
Who cares?
I don't care if he slept with her.
Right. Okay.
Do you care? Do you think he did?
I think he did, and I didn't care.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he probably did, and I don't care.
I mean, yeah. It was like, there's like, it's so well established that her children were gone or whatever, and I was kind of like, well, why? And then I was like,
yeah, what are they doing?
Yeah. And I don't know, like, again, I was really fascinated by it because I'll be honest with you, I assume he did, and it made zero impact on him.
I do think the meeting, you know what, maybe you're right, because I think you are probably right, because I do think, and this goes back to that, this is the moment where I had a real Camilla Parker Bowles, like Diana moment, when she sends the letter saying, hey, we both know the score, why don't you let me come visit you, right? There's this great scene in The Crown season 4 where Camilla invites Diana to lunch. Mm-hmm. And they go to a restaurant. This is real. This is an actual fact event.
Yeah.
They go to a restaurant called Ménage à Trois.
Right.
Which is, I mean, bananas. But anyway, so, and it's just clear in the moment, it's genius in the show too, where like,
right. You're flexing.
She just knows him better than Diana does, right? Like, right. She knows him. And so I think, I think that she wouldn't have flexed.
Right.
If had she not
had him in her bed. Right.
Yeah. Known for sure.
I sealed the deal. Yeah.
That it was going to happen.
Yeah.
But she got real nervous. So I don't know. Maybe she was so nervous because they didn't do it.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was really
say?
Interesting.
If you have an opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll put this up as our poll this week.
Yeah. I just thought it was really fascinating because part of me is like, of course they did it. Right. But it's not on page and he doesn't think about it because, as I said, the emotional cheating is so much more devastating to Millie. Mm-hmm. But I found myself really thinking, like, it's such a fascinating omission. And of course it's on purpose, right? Of course it's on purpose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, sure. Of course.
I wonder if Sherry, too, though, is like, I don't care. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. But I found myself really thinking about it because the Derek.
Well, I go back to
I think.
Lisa saying that to me. Does it matter?
Does it matter? No.
No. Anyway, I'm really glad you loved it. We hope everybody else loved it too. Please let us know. We will put a poll up this week. You tell us what you think about this this question. Did they or didn't they?
Can I just say also before we wrap up, Sherry Thomas has written a really fantastic YA book if you have kids. If you're ever like, I want a YA kind of romance situation.
Yes.
It's a Mulan retelling, and some of my students read it last year, and they loved it, all of them who read it. It's called The Magnolia Sword. And of course, Sherry is now writing a mystery series with a Lady Sherlock.
Sherlock.
And again, people just love them. So,
yes.
Although I hope Sherry goes back to writing like kind of romance one day. What she's writing now is so awesome and so fun. And if you love this book, there's so many great books for you to read that she's still producing in really interesting, fascinating ways.
Yep. Agreed. She's fabulous. This is going to end on a little bit of a sad note, but I just want to shout out